guys, it's me. I'm here for my second video on Gods Unchained. Today I'm going to talk about the nature class, or Aeona, or Aeona, however you want to pronounce it. I'm going to go through what I think are some of her strongest cards and weakest cards, and just kind of talk about the class and what I think of it. So, I guess the first thing we should talk about is the number of cards. Right now we're in the Genesis set, so that means there are only, I think there's a total of 41 cards total in the nature class. 18 of those are commons, 12 of those are rare, and then 6 of those are epic, and 5 are legendary. So what I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to start with the commons and talk about all of those, and then I'll talk about all of the other more rare cards towards the end of the video. Before I get into the specific card reviews, I just want to give a brief overview of what the class is all about. So to me it seems like the nature class is going to be about getting board control, kind of like a mid-tempo sort of class, and then using that board control and buffing the minions that are already on the board, probably a lot of small minions, a lot of tokens, buffing those up, and then kind of just flooding the board and overwhelming your opponent. I think that's how a lot of the nature decks are going to turn out. With that in mind, let's get right into it. So the first card that we're looking at is 1 mana 1/2. It's called Simple Satyr, and the text reads, Roar, heal your god for 2 health. So I think right off the bat this seems like a pretty good card. It's a lot of stats for the amount of mana that it costs, and it has basically a free roar. I mean, it doesn't cost you anything to get that roar, and although 2 health isn't a huge benefit, I don't see much synergy with healing and the nature class. It's still pretty free, so I think 2 health is a nice little bonus that makes this card more than playable. The next one is a 1 mana spell called Uproot, and the text reads, destroy a random enemy creature and summon 2/2 walking tree for your opponent. So I think that this is a great card. It's going to be important to be able to remove your opponent's big cards or bombs when they play them. This gives you that opportunity, and it gives you that opportunity for super cheap. Being able to remove a card for 1 mana just super powerful. Of course, there are some trade-offs, namely that you summon some creatures for your opponent, and also the target that this card hits is somewhat random. But of course, a lot of times your opponent is only going to have 1 or 2 cards on the board, especially if they're playing big, heavy minions that cost a lot of mana. There's a good chance they only have 1 card on the board, so playing this, you're guaranteed to hit that card, and it works out in your favor. So I think this is a really strong card. The next one is a 1 mana spell again called Swelling Boon, and the text is, give a random friendly creature +2/+1. I think this is right in the wheelhouse of what the nature class wants to do. Like I said earlier, they want to flood the board and then buff up their little minions or their little creatures. So giving +2/+1 for 1 mana is a really great card. It's going to be really effective, really useful. I think some of the effectiveness of this card is going to depend on when exactly this can be played. If it's somewhat like Hearthstone, where you have to play this card prior to initiating an attack or prior to defending, then it won't be as good as it would be in a sort of Magic the Gathering scenario, where you can kind of use this as an instant spell or as kind of an interrupt to surprise your opponent and give a card some surprise stats that they weren't expecting. I don't expect it to operate in the Magic the Gathering sort of way, but even without that, even if the mechanics of Gods Unchained are just like Hearthstone, then this is still a strong card, I think, and it really synergizes well with the rest of the class cards. The next card is a 2 mana 3/1 Carcass Vulture. Whenever a friendly Amazon dies, gain +2/+1. I think this is obviously good in Amazon decks. We've yet to see exactly what Amazon decks are going to consist of, so it's kind of hard to judge this card. But it seems like you're going to get a decent amount of stats for the mana. 2 mana is pretty cheap, and yeah, it's hard to say how effective this card is really going to be. I think it's going to be in a lot of Amazon decks if people play Amazon decks, but other than that, I don't really see it getting much play. The next one is 2 mana 2/3. This is Agrador Protector, and it has Frontline. 2 mana 2/3 with Frontline. Frontline, of course, being sort of like Taunt and Hearthstone, is super powerful, right? That's powerful even in Hearthstone, but then in Gods Unchained, where it looks like the stats are going to be somewhat more conservatively rationed, that 2 mana 2/3 is just really strong. And then when it has text like Frontline on top of that, this card is borderline OP. Probably it's going to be a staple in absolutely all nature decks, I think, and it's going to be what allows the nature decks to get that tempo. I think that they're going to desperately need. So this is going to the next one is Fertility Idol, and it's a 2 mana 0/5. After it dies, it summons an Amazon from your hand. So summoning an Amazon from your hand right off the bat seems really conditional, right? I mean, even if you have Amazons in your deck, that's not good enough. They have to be in your hand, and the fact that it's playing it from your hand means you don't really get an extra draw, so it's just giving you a little bit of tempo, but the fact is you kind of already paid for that tempo up front by playing this card in the first place. So without any ways to buff this card, it's obviously pretty garbage. Luckily, the nature class does have a lot of ways to buff cards, so I think I think a lot of nature players are going to like this card, and there's going to be some hidden synergies in that in the class. And if you can get this card to have at least one attack, then I think it becomes really strong, especially in Amazon decks. In fact, maybe only in Amazon decks, but 5 health for 2 mana, even if it gets one attack, it's going to be really strong. So the next one is Sirene's Blessing. This is a 2 mana spell, and it's draw a card, control Amazon, and you'll delve a card out of your deck. So for 2 mana, you cycle this card. Seems kind of trash, right? Unless you have some sort of mechanic that gives you a kickback for casting a lot of spells gratuitously, then I don't see this being that effective. Of course, Delve is a different story, because then you can kind of choose a card. So you're paying 2 mana to choose a card then, instead of draw a card off the top of your deck. But you need an Amazon in order to have that happen. So I think in Amazon decks, this might be okay, depending on how exactly Delve works, which we obviously don't know yet. But in normal decks, it's absolute trash tier. So the next one is Mark of the Warden. This is a 2 mana spell, and it says give a random friendly creature +3 attack. If you control an Amazon, give a target creature +3/+3. Again, it depends whether or not this can be cast as an instant or an interrupt, or whether it's just kind of like a Hearthstone card where you just passively play it on your card, and then those stats are out there for the world to see. I think 2 mana for 3 attack isn't that great. I think if you can get it to go off with the Amazon synergy and you get that +3/+3, then it's really strong. So this is one of those cards where it just, whether it's good or bad, depends entirely on whether or not you're playing an Amazon deck, and if you're lucky enough to get that Amazon synergy at the right time. The next one is a 2 mana spell, Raid, with an exclamation point, and it's deal 2 damage to a random enemy creature. If you control an Amazon, choose the target and deal 4. So this is actually a really good card. I think even without the Amazon synergy, it's still definitely playable. Being able to just deal 2 damage for 2 mana is usually a pretty good bargain. If it hits a random enemy, there's a chance that it goes off on the wrong opponent, and you are paying a card for it, but yeah, maybe it's not that great if it's not an Amazon deck, but obviously if it's in an Amazon deck, then super powerful. Just looking at these cards, what we've seen so far, it's pretty apparent that if you're playing nature, you're going to be playing Amazon because that's like night and day, 2 damage and hitting a random versus 4 damage targeted. So yeah, really, this will be a really strong card in Amazon decks for sure. The next one is Vine Armor, and this is the first and I believe only armor card in the nature class, at least in the Genesis set. And we don't know exactly how armor functions yet, but I'm assuming it's sort of like a Hearthstone weapon, but maybe a slightly more passive. So in Hearthstone, you can attach a weapon to your face and then attack whatever you want. When it's your turn. I think with armor it might be slightly different. Maybe you can't actively choose who you attack. Maybe instead you just kind of sit back and wait to be attacked. But the interesting thing about this is, despite the fact that it says on the card it has one attack, the text reads, whenever your god is attacked, deal 2 damage to the attacker and remove 1 durability. So that's kind of confusing to me. I don't know why it would say deal 2 damage, but then on the card, on the little stat indicator, it says it has 1 attack. So maybe I don't understand how armor is going to work. I think we're going to have to wait and see how this card plays out. But it's definitely interesting, and I like the idea of armor. I'm really curious to see how that mechanic is going to work. The next one is Endow Wings, and this is a 2-mana spell, and it's give all friendly creatures flank. So this is kind of a finishing card, it seems like. Flank allows you to go face, I believe, so you can get around your opponent's frontline cards. Giving all friendly creatures flank is strong if you have a lot of creatures on the board. It's completely useless if you don't. I think for the most part, Hunter is always going to have a lot of creatures on the board. So, and if they don't have a lot of creatures on the board, then they probably lost. So a lot of times I think the nature class will be looking for ways to kind of finish their opponent off, and this could be a card that enables that. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how this one plays out. I mean, 2 mana to give your creatures flank. It doesn't sound that great to me, but I could be totally wrong on this one. I'm open to be proven wrong on this card. The next one is a 2-mana spell, and it's called Spirit Animal. The text is give target Amazon +2/+2, frontline, and leech. So pretty cool card. The leech effect I don't think is super useful on the nature class, but I mean it's obviously a welcome addition. Frontline I think is really strong on the Amazon class because Amazon has a lot of cards that they might want to hide behind a frontline card, cards that kind of take a couple turns to maybe build up or maybe buff other cards. So I think the frontline text is really useful. The +2/+2 is just kind of mediocre for 2 mana. So, and again, you need an Amazon in order for this to go off. So an Amazon deck it might be good. Otherwise, it's not going to have much effect. The next one is a 3-mana spell, Druidic Summons, and it's given Amazon +3/+3. Do the same for another random friendly creature. So I'm assuming you need an Amazon on the board in order for this to start. If you don't, then the other random friendly creature can't act as the initial target. In other words, it's a dead card if you don't have an Amazon on the board, which is unfortunate because it's making it seem like nature is going to be super dependent on Amazons. But obviously, if you do have the Amazon and you get all of those stats, we're looking at +6/+6 total across 2 cards for 3 mana. That's a shit ton of stats for 3 mana. So this card is huge tempo. It's a huge tempo swing, and it could really just take over the game in a single turn if it goes off. The next one is Modeled Ranger. I really like the card art on this card. I think it's cool, one of the cooler ones in the class. And this is a 3-mana 2/2, and the roar is Delve a Creature. Now this is not only one of the coolest looking cards, I think it's one of the strongest cards in the set, definitely one of the strongest common cards. Not in the set, sorry, but in the class. And a 3-mana 2/2 is okay, right? Maybe you're paying like a stat, or yeah, like 1 point worth of stats to get the text, but the text is super strong because you're delving a creature, which is like adding a card. I believe the way Delve is going to work is going to add a card to at least your hand, and that will give you card advantage, and then this card is a 2/2, so it also gives you board presence, so it doesn't sacrifice very much tempo at all, but then it gives you card advantage on top of it. Those two things combined are just always OP. It doesn't matter what card game you're playing, so this is a really strong card, I think. The next one is Jungle Scout. This is a 3-mana 2/2. The roar is draw a creature from your deck. Now this is really similar to the previous card, obviously. Instead of delving a creature, you're drawing a creature instead. Um, I think delving is better because you get to select the card. Drawing just kind of takes it off the top. So this just seems like a strictly worse version of Modeled Ranger, and they are both common cards. So I'm not entirely sure why both of these cards exist simultaneously. Maybe there's something that I'm missing. That's entirely possible, and especially given the fact that I don't know all of the details of how Delve is going to work. But based on what I know now, it does seem like Jungle Scout is just a worse version of Modeled Ranger. The next one is Ferocious Rougarou, and this is a 4-mana 3/2. It has +1/+2 for each other friendly Amazon. Seems like you need at least 2 other Amazons in order for this card to really be worth it, the 4 mana to be worth it. Friendly Amazon, I'm assuming means an Amazon on the board. The odds of this popping off, not very good. I don't really like this card. I don't think it's very strong. Even in an Amazon deck where it goes off, it's kind of mediocre, so not expecting much out of this one. The next one is a 4-mana spell, Gorilla Sabotage. Deal 4 damage to a random enemy creature, draw a card. Deal 4 damage to a random enemy creature and draw a card. Wow, okay, so dealing 4 damage for 4 mana, great. Draw a card, excellent. Altogether, superb. A superb card. The only drawback is that it hits a random enemy creature. But, like I was talking about before with the random text, a lot of times your opponent's only going to have 1 card on the board anyways, so random in that scenario isn't even a drawback. 4 damage, I think, is enough to kill just about any card on your opponent's deck in the mid-game. 4 health is a lot of health, I think, for Gods Unchained, from what I can tell. So even if it hits the wrong target, odds are that target still dies. So I think this is a super strong card, yeah. The next one is Black Rhino, and this is definitely one of the staples of the nature class. I think it's going to be in a lot of decks. It's a 6-mana 4/4 super sturdy card, and it has text: pick one. You can gain to attack and twin strike, or if you'd rather go defense mode, you can get +3 health and frontline. I think more people will go the +3 health and frontline. A 7 mana with frontline for 6, or a 7 health with frontline for 6 mana is insane. I think that a lot of decks are going to have a lot of opponents are going to have a ton of trouble dealing with that sort of card. So it gives you time to fill up the board and get your buffs going off. But I think the +2 attack and twin strike option is really good too, because then, I mean, it gives you that versatility that good players always want in order to make more decisions and kind of outplay their opponent. So I like cards that give you options. I like cards that sort of encourage a little bit of strategy. I think this is one of those cards, and I think it's a strong card to boot. So I'm looking forward to seeing this one in play. The next one is the first rare card now. So we got through all the commons. This is a 1-mana spell. It's called Natural Selection. You target 1 friendly and 1 enemy creature, and they attack each other. So this is a strange card. At first, it made me think that maybe the game mechanics are not going to operate like Hearthstone in Gods Unchained, because at least in Hearthstone, you can target whatever creature you want automatically. You don't need some sort of extra spell in order to do that. But the more I read the card, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized, well, actually, maybe that's not what this card is implying at all. There are other useful cases for Natural Selection, even in a sort of Hearthstone type of game. One is obviously that you can get around your opponent's front line if that's causing you trouble, but also this card could, interestingly enough, it could be used to get sort of 2 attacks out of 1 card. Say, for example, you attack and then your card goes to sleep, but you have 1 extra mana, so you play this card again, and you get an extra attack out of that card during your turn before your turn ends. Also, it could give you a sort of blitz effect or a rush or a charge effect. If you play your card and it's sleeping because it needs to wait for the next turn to actually act, well, maybe you can play this card on top of it and have it attack on the turn that it's played. So that would be an interesting use case too. So pretty cool card. It's going to depend on a lot of variables, whether or not it's strong or not. We'll have to see what comes of it. The next one is Underbrush Boar. This is a 2-mana 3/2. This is a pretty cool card. It's at the end of your turn, you attack a random enemy creature. So I'm assuming that that includes the end of your first turn, which means this does have a sort of blitz effect or a charge effect, which gives a little bit of tempo. It does something on the turn that is played, and I think that's what nature wants for the most part. They want to be more tempo oriented, and a 2-mana 3/2 statted card is really strong. It's aggressively statted, and while maybe that's not ideal, maybe you'd rather have the three stat on the health. Still, I think 3/2 makes a lot of sense for a card like this, and the fact that it does something on the turn that it's played is really strong. It does only attack a random enemy creature, so you have to be careful about when you play it. But if you play it at the right times, I think it can be a super useful card, yeah, for sure. The next one is another spell. This is Dense Fog. I like the card art on this one too, pretty cool. This is confuse all enemy characters until the start of your next turn. So, confusing all enemy characters could be strong, could be weak. It's a super RNG heavy card. It's basically just a meme card, I think. 2 mana to do it is cheap enough to where it might be worth the risk. Maybe you're kind of at a stalemate and you're near endgame and you need one extra turn in order to get lethal on your opponent. So then you play this card as the last ditch attempt to sort of keep yourself alive, maybe, or keep one of your cards alive so they can attack the next turn. In which case, this card could be super fun, but I don't see it being super powerful except for in really special cases. The next one is Ruins Explorer. This is a 2-mana 1/2, and the text reads Delve a Construct. So I don't know what constructs are, but honestly it doesn't matter, because this card is a 2-mana draw card, and it even has stats of 1/2, which is fairly decent for 2 mana. So anytime you can get board presence and draw a card at the same time, I mean, I'm going to put that card in my deck almost every time, I think. And I mean, even if constructs are weak, right? But of course, constructs could be really powerful, in which case this card becomes even more OP. The next one is a Spelljam Shaman. This is a 4-mana 2/3. The text is Roar. Give a friendly Amazon +3/+3, and can't be targeted by spells. Wow. So +3/+3 is a shit ton of stats. I guess if you add that to the 2/3 of the card, then you're looking at 5/6 for 4 mana. That's a lot of tempo, assuming that you have an Amazon on the board. Also, the Amazon that gets the 3/3 can't be targeted by spells, so I don't know how your opponent even deals with it. Judging by the name of it, I think a lot of Amazons are going to be hefty cards, they're going to be sturdy cards with impressive stats. So adding 3/3 on top of whatever those Amazon stats are, and then having it be sort of like spell protected, means it's almost like an invincible card on the board that's just going to remain there for as long as you want it there. So Spelljam Shaman has the potential to be really strong. Of course, only in Amazon decks. If you're not playing in Amazon decks, then you wouldn't play this card. The next one is Rebel Quartermaster. This is a 4-mana 1/3, and the text is whenever you summon a creature, it gains +1/+1. I think this card is actually pretty weak. It seems like it needs at least 2 turns to even be worth the mana cost. It needs 2 turns of like buffing something. Maybe if you play a bunch of cheap cards, then you can get it to go off you can get Rebel Quartermaster to go off a few times within a single turn, but at only 3 health, I don't see this card lasting very long, given the fact that your opponent is going to have 4 mana, maybe even 5 mana to deal with it on their next turn. So the odds that this card survives long enough to actually have any effect and snowball out of control seem pretty slim. And for 1 attack, it's not really doing anything on the aggressive side. So I think in short, this card is just too slow maybe for the class, and it's too much of a tempo sacrifice, I think. The next one is Drider of the Depths. This is a pretty cool card. It's a 4-mana 4/6, which is really overstated actually. Super tempo, fast tempo card. But the reason it's so fast tempo is because you're doing you have to take a choice. You have to like sacrifice either 8 health or you have to discard a card. So I think discarding a card, even though that sounds relatively bad, it actually makes a lot of sense for this one, because I think 9 times out of 10, Drider of the Depths is going to give you a 2-for-1 on the board, because it's a 6 health frontline card. So I think it's probably going to take 1, probably 2 cards for your opponent to actually get through this beast. So you'll make up for the card that you discarded right there. But the fact is, you don't even have to choose discard a card. You can instead just choose deal 8 damage to your god, which is even less of a drawback. Because, especially given the fact that I think the nature class doesn't want to fall behind on the board, and if they're at a point in the game where 8 health is a serious concern to them, then they've probably already lost control of the game anyways, and they're going to lose. So the 8 damage isn't going to make a big difference one way or the other. So I think Nature's more than happy to sacrifice 8 damage in order to get the extra tempo that this card provides. Super fun card. We'll see later on how this card actually has negative synergy with some of the legendaries in the deck, but we'll talk about that when we get there. The next one is Wild's Life Bonder. Wild's Life Bonder, yeah. This is 4 mana 4/4, and it's start your turn, gain 1 mana. 4 mana 4/4, I love those stats, just beautifully symmetrical. I think that's a well-balanced card. The start of your turn, gain 1 mana is great text. I think it essentially gives this card frontline, because if your opponent doesn't kill it on the first turn, then it's just going to snowball out of control. And even if they do kill it on the first turn, you're not super sad, because it's probably going to take a decent amount of resources from them to kill a 4 health card. So really just a solid card, yeah, for sure. The next one is Revenant Lynx, another super sturdy card. This is a 4 mana 3/5, and Afterlife, you send it back to your deck. So I don't think that the sending it back to your deck is going to be super impactful, because Nature isn't, from what I can tell, like a super slow type of class, so you're not going to be running through your whole deck to the point where you're drawing this over and over and over again. But if you did turn out to be against an opponent who wants to sort of exhaust your entire deck or something, and kind of mill you to death, then this card could be useful as a sort of counter pick to that. But even without any of that, right? Even without any of the text, without any of those small advantages, the card is still a great card. So you're going to want to play it. And 4 mana 3/5. I don't think there's any point in the game when you're disappointed to top deck this. The next one is Jungle Shepherd. This is a 5 mana 4/3, and the text is Roar. Give a friendly Amazon +2/+2 and frontline. This card is very underwhelming. 5 mana 4/3 just doesn't cut it, and then giving it +2/+2 is good if you have an Amazon on the board, but are you really going to wait around for that to happen? I just don't think at 5 mana, I don't think this card makes enough of an impact. In Amazon decks, people will play it, right? Just for the memes, but... The next one is Murdo's Daughter. This is a 5 mana 2/1, has Blitz and also Pick 1. The Pick 1 gives you the option of gaining 2/2 or giving a friendly Amazon +4/+3. So let's see, if you have Blitz and you pick the +2/+2, that gives you a 4/3 Blitz for 5 mana. That seems decent. That definitely seems like it's a balanced card. I wouldn't call that OP, but I think in Nature class it's even a little bit stronger, because it allows you to finish off your opponent a little bit quicker before the more control-y sort of decks can claim back the board control. If you choose the latter option, which is give a friendly Amazon +4/+3, then you're really popping off. You're getting a lot of tempo, and it's a great card. Obviously, if you have the Amazon on the board already, and then you give it +4/+3, that it can utilize those stats right away. So in that case, Murdo's Daughter is doing something on the turn that it's played. I guess even with Blitz, it's doing something on the turn that it's played. So it's a good card. It's a good card, and it's going to be useful in a lot of decks, Amazon decks in particular. The next one is Loam Naturalist. This is a 6 mana 6/6, and you heal 4 health to both gods. 6 mana 6/6 is good, but healing 4 health to both gods, I think, is actually definitely... it's definitely more of a drawback than a benefit to the Nature class. I don't think 4 health is going to matter to the nature class. The nature class, I don't see you're trying to hold on to health until you can finally sort of make that big combo move, or you know, I don't know, maybe reverse the tempo somehow. I think that the 4 health isn't going to make a difference to the nature class, but it could very well make a little bit of a difference to any of the opposing classes. So 6 mana 6/6 is relatively strong, and so people will probably play this card, but I don't think it's particularly good. It's decent, though. The next one is Grassroots. This is a 2 mana card, 2 mana spell. So obliterate a random card in your opponent's void and draw a creature from your deck. Even if you obliterated a chosen card in your opponent's deck, is this card even good? I don't think so. It's still just basically a 2 mana cycle, which is sacrificing a decent amount of tempo for what? I don't know. We'll have to see how the void mechanics work in the other classes before we can really judge this card. But based on my first impressions, I don't think it's particularly good. Maybe it'll be useful as a sort of hate draft against like a certain class or something if deck style gets really OP, especially ones like the Death class, which maybe has a lot of void mechanics. But aside from those rare cases, I don't think this has much of an effect. All right, going on to the next one. Compost Charm. This is a 2 mana spell, and it's target a friendly creature, and it gains afterlife, and you add 2 random constructs to your hand. Oh no! So you play this spell on a card, and then when that card dies, you get 2 constructs, and they go directly to your hand. Way too slow for the class. So you have to pay 2 mana to get this off, and then that's assuming you have board presence, and then even if you have board presence and you pay the 2 mana, then you have to wait for that card to die before you get 2 cards to your hand. But then you still have to play those 2 cards. So you're just waiting all these turns for anything to really take effect, and I just don't think that this class wants to do that sort of thing. At least not now. Maybe when more cards are revealed in the future, that will change. The next one is Proud Conscriptor. This is a 3 mana 2/1, and it's Afterlife. Summon a 1/1 Amazon Recruit for each of the creature's attack value. So if you buff this card's attack a bunch, then you summon a bunch of Amazon Recruits. This card's value will depend a lot on how Amazon Recruits operate. If they are, for all intents and purposes, proper Amazons, and they have all the Amazon synergy that any other Amazon would have, then this could be really strong, right? Because you can just spawn a shit ton of Amazons and then buff them all with all these synergies and just kind of take over. But yeah, and I think that's probably how it will work, right? And at worst case scenario, even if you play this card and it dies on the turn that you played it and you never buff it at all, you're still spawning 2 1/1 Amazons. So definitely seems worth it. Definitely seems like a good card. Yeah. Next one is Bucking Bronco. I think this is probably the strongest. Oh, actually, this is the first. Oh no, we're already into the epics. Yeah, sorry. So no, I think this is the strongest epic though in the class. This is 6 mana 5/3. It's kind of like the Leroy Jenkins of Gods Unchained, I feel like. It's a little bit more expensive than Leroy Jenkins, I believe, but it has a little bit more health too. And it has Blitz and Roar. Give all friendly creatures Blitz until the end of your turn. So a great finishing card. It's not going to be super versatile. It's not a subtle card in any way, but it will be really useful for ending the game. And I think in a lot of ways that's what this class wants. Yeah. The next one is Photogenesis. This is a 7 mana spell, and it allows you to fill the board with 1/1s. When I looked at the board, the sort of like prototype board that Gods Unchained has, it looks like each player will have 6. Will be able to stack the board with 6 cards before the board is full on their side. Assuming that's the case, then you're spawning 6 1/1s if you had an empty board. So if you have an empty board and you have 7 mana and you play this card, then you get 6 1/1s. Does that give you a chance to come back in the game? Maybe, but I doubt it. If you have an empty board at 7 mana, then I think you're doing something wrong. At least in this class. The next one is Specialist Force. This is a 10 mana spell, and it summons 3 random Amazons. Um, yeah, okay, sort of a meme card. I'm sure it's a great finisher, right? For 10 mana, basically everything has to be a great finisher. The randomness, the random Amazons. I mean, I don't know exactly what all the Amazons are, obviously, so. But if Amazons are anything like their name sounds, they're like big, beefy, chunky cards that are hard to get rid of. So, I mean, having 3 of them is probably game winning, but it's 10 mana. So, how often do you really get to use this card? We'll see. All right, on to the legendaries, and one of my favorite cards in the class, just because of the card art and also the text. But the card art is especially cool on this one. I like the colors on it. This is Susella. It's a 5 mana 3/3, and at the end of your turn, at the end of your turn, another random friendly creature gains +2/+2. So adding +2/+2 every turn can add up really quick. This card basically has to be killed by your opponent on the turn that you play it. 3 health isn't super easy to kill, so it definitely poses a problem. It definitely poses a threat. If it's not dealt with, then it just spirals out of control really quickly. And it has 3 attack, so it can do a little bit of damage on its own if you want. For 5 mana, I think that's a great bargain. Super great bargain. Great card. The next one is Nature Overgrown. This is a 6 mana spell. And the roar is obliterate all creatures in your void. Your god power becomes cultivate. So I don't see any reason why nature would have any problem with obliterating all the creatures in their void. The only card that I think this would even interact with is that Panther Epic. Let's see if I can find it real quick. I think this one. So actually no, because this would just go right back in your deck. So this card would avoid being obliterated. Never mind. So yeah, I don't really see any reason. I mean, nature doesn't draw anything from her void. Maybe her god power will, in which case this card has some subtle effects that I'm not aware of. But the way I'm reading it, there's basically no drawback to obliterating all the creatures in your void, and your god power becomes cultivate. What that means, I have no idea. So it could be useful, it could be non-useful. I'm assuming cultivate is probably like add a 1/1 token to a chosen creature on the board or a random creature on the board. But we'll have to wait and see before I make a final judgment on this one. The next one is Hippolyta Divided. That's a 6 mana 3/4. In my opinion, this is the strongest legendary, the strongest card in the entire nature class, at least in the Genesis set. And the reason is because of stats. This card has a ton of stats. It's a 6 mana 3/4 right on the face of it, and then the text allows you to beef it up even bigger. So you can either gain 2/4, or you can give it protected, and a bunch of other stuff. So gaining the +2/+4 right off the bat makes it a 5/8. A 5/8 for 6 mana is pretty insane. I don't think a lot of opponents will be able to handle that kind of health easily, if at all. Maybe like the mind control type of cards will, but aside from that, I don't know you're gonna get stomped, rolled. And then it gets Olympian. Whether or not that's used, I don't know. This is the only card in the entire class, in the nature class, that has Olympian text. So I don't know how useful that's going to be yet. But then, yeah, that's the first option. The second option is you get Blitz, Protected, and Leech. Like I said before, and Amazon. So this one makes a lot of sense in Amazon decks. Maybe you'd be more likely to choose the second option. The Leech is kind of meh. I don't think that's super important. Although, actually, I take that back, because if this card is going to have Protected on it, then it's going to get a couple of hits off, and that leech health could add up really quick. And then it has Blitz, so it's going to give you that effect on the first turn, too. Yeah, so, God, there's just so many things this card can do, and it does them all super well. So this card is OP. If there's one card in the class that's OP, I think it's this one. The next one is Avatar of Nature. This is 7 mana 4/7. At the end of each turn, summon a 1/1 Living Earth. So, I mean, it's a slow card. It's a value sort of card. I don't necessarily see that being the way that the nature class plays out. But I think you're safe putting this in your deck anyways, even if you have it. Just because it has 7 health, it's probably going to stick around for you for a few turns. Even if it doesn't, then it's going to take a lot of resources from your opponent in order to get rid of it. So you're happy just to kind of sacrifice it in that case. And then if it ends up spawning a bunch of 1/1s for you, great, you win the game. And this is the last card in this set. This is Aeneas, I believe that's how you pronounce it. This is an 8-mana 8/5. And the text is, your pick one effects have both combined. So the text I don't think is all that useful, and maybe I'll go into that in a second. The stats are interesting, super aggressively statted. 8 attack is definitely the most attack heavy card in the entire set, so that's pretty cool. The 5 health is still chunky enough to maybe let this one survive. We'll see. But the real interesting part of this card is how the pick one effects can be combined when this card is on the board. So I went through the class, and I think there are 4 cards altogether, aside from Aeneas, that have pick one text. And so presumably they would synergize with this card. Of course, I should mention that one of those cards is... it actually has a negative synergy with this card because, actually I'll just show you real quick. So yeah, this card in particular, Drider of the Depths, the picked ones are both negative effects, right? So you're gonna have to deal, if you already have Aeneas on the board and you play this, then you're gonna have to deal 8 damage to your god and discard a card, which obviously is not ideal. But one thing worth noting is I noticed all of the pick one cards that would potentially synergize with this card, they're all pretty high cost cards. So these are the 4 of them. There's Black Rhino, Drider of the Depths, Murdo's Daughter, and Hippolyta. They're all strong cards, but they're all also pretty expensive. So you can't play them at the same turn that you play Aeneas, which means you have to wait for the next turn. And then assuming he stays alive, you need one of these 4 cards, which isn't a lot. There's not a lot of them, so the odds of you having them in your hand are pretty slim. And then you can still only basically play 1 on the next turn because they're also expensive. So yeah, for that reason I don't see the text being particularly strong right now. I think there's a lot of potential for this card once more cards are released and revealed, and then we can see if there are other cheaper cards with the pick one text that the nature class will have access to, in which case this card will get stronger as time goes on. But for now, I think it's probably the weakest legendary in the set, or the class. And that's it. That's actually all the cards then. So I hope you guys enjoyed my reviews. I hope maybe it was somewhat useful for you. I should add on to this that obviously no one really knows how effective all these cards are going to be. I was just excited about them. I can't play with the cards no matter how bad I want to, so I figured I might as well talk about them and just have some fun doing that. So that's kind of why I made this video. I definitely think that I'm probably wrong on a lot of my assessments here, but I think and no one knows, right? No one knows until the games actually go into play how effective a lot of them are going to be. But I still think it's fun to speculate, and it's fun to kind of analyze them and kind of guess. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm sure a lot of you disagree with my opinion on the cards. Let me know in the comments section. If you decide to buy more packs, use my referral link. That'd be cool. And stay tuned, because I'm going to do a video like this for all the classes. I don't know what the next class is going to be yet, but... I'm always in the Discord, so if you guys want to stay up to date there, I'll probably give an update about what class I'm going to do next and stuff like that. But yeah, I think hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you made it through the whole video, I know this was a pretty long one, so if you didn't, that's totally okay. But yeah, hit the like button if you liked. Subscribe if you want to see my next videos. And thanks for tuning in. Bye.